Well, hello everyone, and welcome once again to another episode of the Civil War Regiments Podcast. I'm really excited. This is the second one that I've had an in-person guest on. Just opened a studio not long ago. It's been a long time coming. I'm always adding something new in here every other day or so. But my guest today is Ryan Alcaino. We're both Alabamians here. We're not far apart from each other, and about a year ago I had Ryan on the show to talk about really anything regiment related. And I think even at the time, I think you had even mentioned like, hey, if we do it again, we should talk about movies.
Yes.
And I kept that in the back of my pocket, and I said, yeah, that's a good idea, because I always love talking movies. I used to have a little movie podcast, and so I'm excited about that. There's a lot of movies that we could talk about, and particularly, movies that kind of showcase the best in soldier life and even regimental depiction. There's not many movies that kind of focus on a regiment. Most war epics or grand narratives, just like a book narrative study, that you don't get the individual companies and regiments featured. But there is a handful of movies out there, and you never know what deep cuts we might find and random references that we come across today. But Ryan, thanks for coming on, man.
Thank you for having me. This studio is awesome. It's really cool.
Yeah.
It's an upgrade from the other one, but this is great. I love all the flags and the paintings and everything. It's very cool.
Wow. Thank you, man. And all these pictures are actually from a bunch of Civil War calendars I had.
Oh, really?
For some reason, I saved them because I liked all the pictures, and I had all of them saved in my closet for ages. And when I set up the studio, I put all the padding in, and I did it kind of like a checkerboard. But then I thought, man, what can I do in here extra? Mm-hmm. And I had all those calendars, and so I just cut them up, and I put in, they fit perfectly in each of the squares. And so you can't see it you can only see one side if you're watching, but the whole room is surrounded by these. And so it's really cool.
Yeah, we got them all over the place.
I love it. And so thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah. And also, once again, we also have an audience member too. Shout out to Ryan's daughter who's joining us.
She's got her headphones in. She's on the iPad, keeping herself busy.
Yeah, but you never know. She might have some input later.
She might.
So, like what her favorite Civil War movie is. But no, I know, man, it's been a long while. We just caught up a little bit before the show, and I do want to give a shout out to something you just told me a few minutes ago, that you're going to be leading a church group to Chickamauga.
Yes.
Pretty soon. That sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah. So part of the advantages of being a homeschool parent is homeschool co-ops.
Yeah.
Because you want to get the kids involved socially and not just staying at home and learning things. And co-ops are very important for that. And there's a group here in Birmingham and the surrounding areas of parents all getting together. We do field trips multiple times a year, and they'll throw together stuff, and kind of not really the head, but she's really into a lot of that. She had approached me and said, you're big into history, you know Civil War stuff, so can you come and do what if we went to Chickamauga and Chattanooga? And I said, sure, I'd love to. So my plan is to get my uniform and everything and lead the kids. And most of these are kids that I know, so I'll feel comfortable. But Chickamauga is a great battlefield and awesome visitor center.
And it's the 160th anniversary.
And it is the 160th anniversary. Now, we'll be going in October instead of September, but close enough.
Yes. Yeah.
Close enough. It'll be
right
fall.
Between the Chickamauga and Chattanooga campaign.
Exactly,
right?
Pretty much right between. Mm-hmm. So
that's great.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, that's something to look forward to. And I want to get back out there, too, because it really deserves the attention, and excuse me. It's kind of like the biggest Western battlefield. I mean, the biggest Western battle. And that to me, that's always been a remarkable that you have Gettysburg and Chickamauga, two of the biggest battles in both theaters, a couple months apart from each
within
other.
2.5 months of each other.
And then some of the same soldiers fighting in both battles. So that's pretty incredible. So please, I hope to do some Chickamauga episodes soon. And so please be sure to check out Chickamauga in the coming weeks. it's well worth it to learn more about that battle.
Yeah,
So,
all the guys that run that play. I mean, the
Yeah.
visitor center. If you've ever been to Chickamauga, the visitor center, I feel, and not to disparage the new Gettysburg Visitor Center, and I haven't been to Antietam's new visitor center since they just
right.
opened.
That's right. Yeah.
But Chickamauga has always been just, I think, the best in terms of interpretation, how nice it is. They've got a fantastic bookstore. And all those guys that are there now, Jim Ogden, Lee White, and all the other Rangers, those guys are top notch. You're not going to find better Rangers, anywhere. I mean, you might find some on their level, but you're not going to find guys any better than them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Chickamauga's awesome. It's easily accessible. Yeah. It's a huge, sprawling battlefield. Monuments, really impressive monuments.
They really do. They really do.
Just not that easy to follow. You really have to dive in and to understand the battle.
And for us, and so, I know it might sound cheesy to some of you, but almost like if you want to get a Gettysburg fix or a big battlefield fix, Chickamauga's the closest for us.
Yeah.
And so it's 2-3 hours away for most of us, and so I'm a 3-hour drive away from diving into this huge battle. Mm-hmm. Tons of monuments. We've both done many living histories there. Mm-hmm. It's always hot out there, but I always enjoy doing events at Chickamauga because there's so many regiments and ideas that you can recreate. Mm-hmm. I know a group of guys who have done Wilder's Lightning Brigade up there, and that's a fun impression to do out there. And then check out the Wilder Tower too if you go.
Yeah.
And then there's going to be living histories this year, so. Contact the park, look at the park website, schedule of events. There should be a lot posted soon, and because it's only a month away in the anniversary, so check it out. I'm sure some of our mutual friends will be there doing stuff, and so great. But yeah, please look into Chickamauga. But today we're here to talk about regiments and movies and cinema, and between the two of us, we've probably seen our share of many epic war films, and if you're like me, I also, every war time period I look into, whether it's Napoleonic times or World War I or World War II. There's so many movies for every time period. And Civil War might have the fewest in some regards, but they still did very well with the handful that we have here. The ones that come to mind especially are Glory and Gettysburg are probably two of the more prominent ones, and Gaza Generals and others. But to kick things off, for you personally, what's a Civil War film that you saw that you feel, in your opinion, just got it right, whether it's soldier life or battle tactics? Which one kind of just feels the closest and best to you?
Based on my perception.
Yeah.
I can tell you my favorite is Glory, but if I had to choose, I guess I would choose Gettysburg, just in terms of getting the feel right.
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in a good historical movie doesn't have to be 100% accurate from a material accuracy standpoint. Even the plot doesn't have to be exactly. But what I value in a movie, especially a historical movie, is the aesthetic and the feel.
Yeah.
And I think last time we had a discussion, it's like, let's compare two historical movies, Gods and Generals and Braveheart. One of these movies is in a completely different galaxy in terms of historical accuracy from the other. That Braveheart gets maybe 10% of the history right. Gods and Generals gets maybe 90 to 95%. However, if you ask 100 people on the street, 90% of them are going to say, "Oh man, I want to watch Braveheart again and again because that's a great movie."
Yeah,
Braveheart,
exactly.
And a lot of those movies, a good historical movie gets the atmosphere right. Right from the beginning of that movie, it's Scotland. Yep. It's the 13th century, and it's muddy and it's nasty, and you get a feel for that. Gettysburg, I think, does a good job, and maybe it's because they filmed it all in Adams County. Everything in that movie is on location. There's no studio that they're dressing up, and that comes across somehow. And they all filmed it within a few months of it. It's not like they filmed it over several years. So when you see Jeff Daniels or you see Tom Berenger or you see, some of the individual soldiers, maybe they've got dirt and grime on them because it's hot outside.
Yeah.
They've been outside this entire time, other than maybe, if there was a trailer and they went and spent an hour in their trailer having a drink or something. They're out there in it with the reenactors and everybody else.
And it's just like when we do a reenactment, sometimes it's not till Sunday morning that we really finally get the look.
Exactly.
You get the dirt in your hair, and by the end of the weekend, you look like, these guys look like,
Yeah, and I think that seems to have been kind of a natural consequence of the filming itself, because it wasn't as big budget as Gods and Generals will end up being, or like Glory, or a lot of these others. They were kind of, it's not a shoestring budget, but they were kind of pulling some things together. They had to rely on the reenactors. But yeah, I mean, when you watch that, when you watch some of those scenes, like the 20th Maine scenes on Little Round Top, you get a sense of they're in it. They are dirty for that. They're not. This is not just makeup. This is real dirt and grime that they are going through on the actual location in many cases. So, from that perspective, I would give it the edge to Gettysburg. I love Glory, and I that's my second favorite movie of all time. It's my favorite Civil War movie, and very sentimental. But I think Gettysburg gets something right that Glory, and maybe Glory's not that, maybe they weren't that interested in it, and they do a great job in that movie too. But Gettysburg gets something right.
I feel like, there's elements of almost every historical epic film that gets something right. And it's almost like if you pull the best from Gettysburg, the best from Glory, and the best from some of these others, you have a really darn good movie.
Yeah.
But like each of them in their own way. So like, I think I talked about this to you before, like Glory really just captures the workings of a regiment, the logistics of a regiment. Like, there's scenes in there about them getting paid and getting supplied with rifles. And, you really understand. You can watch that and you go like, oh, wow, this is how our regiment worked. This is how everything came together. And so from that standpoint, that's one takeaway I get. Gettysburg is good for just showing you those brigade and single regiment type actions on screen. And for me, Gettysburg, was the first one that kind of introduced me to an individual regiment too, and getting a smaller scale depiction. But so they captured that really good. And then there's so many we can shout out, but like one I already think that comes to mind, I don't have it here. I have a wide assortment of DVDs laid out over here, but one that I don't have is The Red Badge of Courage from 1951, I believe, the John Huston film starring Audie Murphy. And I know it might get some, dislikes because of the accuracy. I think they're wearing like Spanish American War type uniforms, and some of the tactics they do in the movie are like, what are they doing?
Well, in the landscape, I mean, what a wonderful recreation of Central Virginia in the desert of California.
Which shout out, the Red Badge of Courage novel, is the story is based on a 304th New York. And the battle that takes place is said to be Chancellorsville. But Stephen Crane befriended a lot of veterans of the 124th New York Orange Blossoms. And so a lot of the stories that he got from that was from veterans of the 124th telling stories. And he just made it a fictionalized. I think it's really smart that he did that, too, that he made this fictionalized version. But the biggest takeaway from the book and the movie for Red Badge of Courage is it captures the emotions of war. The stresses, the emotions. And so I recommend Red Badge of Courage for that aspect, that you really get that. You don't necessarily get that in Gettysburg or Glory, but like you get that fear. They really focus, like there's so many close-up images of soldiers like sweating it out. And what I hate about that movie too, and we could talk about this out, that movie got severely edited down, if you know that story.
Oh, no, I didn't.
The movie is literally like just over an hour.
Oh, well, no, I know that. I didn't know that.
But it was originally like 2.5 hours.
Oh,
It was an epic war film. And John Huston was all about showing war honestly. And at the time, people didn't want that or like that. And it was also the Cold War era. And they didn't like the fact that he was harping on fear and stresses. Like they wanted to I saw a documentary on this not long ago, but like I think it was that Real History YouTube channel did a whole episode on it, and they were talking about how at the time the Hollywood executives were like, we really need to show strong American soldiers.
Yeah.
We can't show this
Weak.
graphic violence. We can't show this weak men. And so it went from a 2.5-hour movie to like 65-minute movie. And I hate that. And it's got lost to time. No one knows where that footage is. And so one of these days, if that movie ever comes out as it was meant to be, I hope we get a chance maybe somehow to see that someday. But
I would love to see a new like a new treatment of it.
Yeah,
because there was that one was
the 70s,
the one in the 70s
with John Boy,
yeah, the Waltons,
yeah.
Not terrible. I mean, as a kid, of course, I watched it.
Yeah,
but man, if you could get and it really wouldn't be that hard to do because I'm not aware of a lot of big epic scenes where you're going to see more than a couple of regiments going at each other.
Mm-hmm.
So you wouldn't have to have 1,000 extras. You wouldn't have to have all this stuff. And it's, if it's Chancellorsville, so much of it takes place in the woods, on these, I think it would be relatively easy to do from an accuracy standpoint, just get, put out the word for 6 months. Hey guys, all authentic reenactors, we need you. And we'll put it together. I think you could do it. I think you could do it pretty well. I think that would be and it's a classic story. Eventually somebody's going to pick it up. I'd rather somebody with a mind to history and the original story pick it up rather than somebody who's going to try and remake, take your pick. The Lord of the Rings show on Amazon or something else, and they're going to put in all kinds of things that aren't even relevant. So,
which there was also. Shout out! I just remembered this. There was a Wishbone episode of Red Badge of Courage.
There was, yeah.
You remember that?
That's right. Yep.
And it was a good episode.
Yep.
I remember enjoying that.
Wishbone, yeah.
Look that up. I wonder how easy you could find that. But do you remember talking about just getting an authentic group of reenactors together? Do you remember Wicked Spring?
Mm-hmm.
Did you see that? And I know a lot of people kind of knock on that one a lot sometimes, but like they got the accuracy all down.
Sure.
The appearance all looks great. Everything's authentic looking, but no one really bought into the story and just the acting and it's kind of like it's like it's missing the story and acting element. It looks great, just like some of these movies here, can have a good story, good acting, but the crappy uniforms, and sometimes that alone. It's like that could just change a whole dynamic of a movie when it's a good story, but the main character has this crazy floppy hat or something. You know what I mean? Like there's times
or a really bad beard.
Longstreet, Gettysburg Beards,
Beards,
and that hat he wears is so huge. It's ginormous.
We set up the projector last night. You got a new projector in the screen, and we watched Raiders of the Lost Ark. And that was fun. The kids went to bed, and me and Ashley, we finished it.
Nice.
Classic movie. But then she was going to bed, and I was cleaning up, and I was like, we turn on Gettysburg. And, just being able to, it's not like the big screen, but, and it was that scene with Longstreet and Hood. It's like, I do this under protest, General. They're going to roll rocks down on us. And, and then, there's Longstreet with his big floppy hat and that horrible beard. And on the battlefield, that was the shot I guess that was the Bushman farm or somewhere around there where they filmed it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, they did, they really did a good job of finding where they could film. And, I mean, obviously there's some shots where there's a monument in the background or, there's supposedly one where you can see a car driving by the Alabama monument in the distance. I've never seen it or looked for it, but I give credit where it's due there because they put there's a lot of heart in that movie to get that story right. Yeah. And unfortunately, I don't feel the same way about Gods in General. I don't feel the heart or the desire, at least from the filmmakers, maybe from the actors, but not from the filmmakers for that movie.
Well, one major fact is Gettysburg is one event in a couple, like the movie just takes place in like a 3-4 day window.
Yeah.
But Gods in General focuses on 3 years of war. In like a 4-hour movie, and so it's just so much spread out, and again, looks great. In fact, if you want to talk about brigade level stuff, I think Gods and Generals really does a good job showing you brigade level combat. I really, to me personally, I really like the Fredericksburg battle scenes.
That's the best. That's the best part of the movie.
They look amazing. It made me want to buy a greatcoat as soon as I saw the movie. But like, that just showed you good. I mean, to me, that's a great segment. The only one of the negatives from Fredericksburg, and I think this is just Ted Turner's Gone with the Wind dream fantasy, because that whole bit where all the civilians are running through downtown Fredericksburg, like that didn't happen. The people were cleared out. There wasn't hundreds of innocent bystanders running through the streets, and so they did that for Hollywood, you know. But other than that, if you skip that, everything depicting Fredericksburg was pretty darn cool, and they filmed that at Harper's Ferry.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
they filmed the
town scenes.
Yeah.
It's cool. If you ever go to Harper's Ferry, like I didn't even realize at first. I was walking around downtown Harper's Ferry, and I was like, I've seen this before.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my gosh, like this is where they filmed Gods of Generals. So it's cool. But no, you're right. Gods of Generals is lacking that heart, you know, and it's I again, you know, you talk about Braveheart, and like you could pop in a Braveheart DVD over and over again, you know, but we constantly go back to Gettysburg. We're just constantly going back to this. Like, honestly, at least once a month, I might randomly tune into a scene or something from Gettysburg, and I don't do that for Gods of Generals, some of the other ones, and you know, and I you know, it kind of, I think Gods of Generals also kind of hurt history cinema, because they put in a movie theater, it was such a big bomb in the movie theaters that it kind of down, and then of course a lot of other big events happen in our country and in our world that you know, just Civil War epic films have not come anywhere again. I mean, they've come on a smaller scale, but a big epic theater release hasn't really happened like that, and I hope someday that maybe that can change again, where we get some good storytelling again and good movies. But it's hard. But yeah. So okay, something I always think about, and I think even our friends over at Addressing Gettysburg have talked about a lot, where everybody just wants like a Band of Brothers type Civil War film.
Yeah,
we all see. You know, I love Band of Brothers. I watch that whole series at least once a year. I go through the whole series. Love it. Everybody loves it. And it got so many people into World War II. People just want that for Civil War. And, you know, there's so many regiments you could think about. I have so many on a bucket list that are like, oh, it'd just be so cool if you could tell these guys a story. Or make a whole mini series. And that, because that's what it doesn't need a movie. It kind of needs a
You've got to, unless you're just doing one battle. Yeah, I thought about that too. The series is good. Unless you change the history for, you know, one unit, it would be hard to pick a particular regiment that you could see the things. An obvious choice, I guess, you know, you maybe could do one about, you know, the Sam Watkins story, the 1st Tennessee, you know, and all of his Western campaigns. Of course, as we know, Sam Watkins embellished about 50% of whatever he wrote down, you know, so it was, you know, take it with, you know, a couple of big boxes of kosher salt, obviously. I mean, there are some good choices. I think that my idea for that was, you know, you could do a story on, I mean, I think a Grant miniseries would be pretty good.
Yeah.
You know, even though, you know, it's not regimental necessarily, that's a compelling story. You know, you go from right when the war begins through Donelson, Shiloh, Vicksburg would be, you know, an episode and a half, 2 episodes, do a quick little one on Chattanooga, and then overland campaign to the end. I mean, that would be fascinating.
That would be, yeah.
I think Douglas Southall Freeman's Lee's Lieutenants, if you made a mini series about that and you showed all of the, now it would be hard to do that today.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that might be fun to talk about, you know, who you would cast as particular people, but that would be a cool one. You know, it would be like Gods and Generals, but it would be, I don't know, you could do it better and you could devote more time and energy to it. You know,
I just thought of one funny thing. We talk about Guns N' Roses Gettysburg. Of course, they're based off of the books and the trilogy of sorts. And the Last Full Measure book came out, and that's my favorite book of the trilogy. Is The Last Full Measure. I really love that one, and I would read that over and over again. And it does a great job with Grant and his staff, and I can picture that so well, but in a movie form. But I know some parts of my joke about it all the time, where there's always been over the years all these rumors like, did you hear they're finally making the Last Full Measure?
Finally making it.
And I know some guys who they'll post like pictures of themselves at a reenactment, and they'll be like first images of Last Full Measure just to explode the reenacting social media for a while. And next thing you know, for the next like 2 days, people are like, did you hear? They're finally doing it.
Yeah.
And but it's probably never going to happen.
Well, I remember Stephen Lang, was it last year or 2 years ago? He was at Gettysburg.
Yeah.
And he was going to take part, just walking along with Matt Atkinson. He was doing a Pickett's Charge one, and he talked for like 20 minutes.
Sure.
And somebody asked him about that. Yes, I am. I've been cast as Robert E. Lee in this movie, and and he was like, "No, that's never going to happen." And everyone kind of laughed, but I think for a second people were like, "Oh, really?"
yeah. And it would be hard, like you said, and one group. If I had to pick one unit, I'm a huge fanatic about the heavy artillery regiments during the Civil War, and you do have that factor that, like, for a couple years those guys were doing nothing besides cleaning guns and cleaning garrisons, and so you have that kind of like that's a good character study opportunity where guys get in trouble in DC and all the rigmarole, and they're like, why can't we fight? We want to fight. We're just sitting here. Like, you have that whole compelling element, and then all of a sudden Grant shows up, calls them to the front, and they're introduced to some of the most brutal conflict,
the worst
ever.
Possible fighting.
And so these guys go from doing absolutely nothing to getting absolutely destroyed, essentially, in just a few weeks' time. To me, that would just be a really good story.
That's a great idea. That would be cool. You could do like a 6-parter, where the first episode or two is. And
it's setting it up. Like, you're introducing all these colonels and commanders, and
you could do the recruitment too.
Yeah,
that's one thing that and I know people have opinions about Band of Brothers and Pacific, and there's a new one about the Air War coming out.
Yeah,
but
that's right.
One thing I will say, and I going back and I just recently rewatching parts of the Pacific, I like that better than Band of Brothers because of the other aspects that it brings in, and so you get to see some of that. I'm going off. And especially from a Civil War standpoint, so much of the recruitment and the build up to the war, because it's not like Pearl Harbor being bombed and we got to go. No, we've finally made it. The tension is built up. Now it's spilling over. It's time to go off and fight on this adventure, and you get to see that, and then an episode and a half or two. And they're just drilling, sitting around, dealing with desertions, dealing with bad food, parades, hearing about defeats, and then boom, the call comes. And and honestly, you think about Band of Brothers. The U.S. got into the war in December of 41. They are not in combat until June of 1944. They are less than a year in combat. Just right at about 11 months, I guess. From June to May of 45. And that is a huge chunk of that series.
Sure.
But you look at Eugene Sledge doesn't get into combat until September of 44, and then September to I know it ended in August, but through May of 45 when he finishes on Okinawa, and it's like
he may as well have been fighting for 5 years.
It's an awful lot of living,
everything that happened in that time,
and survival in a very short amount of time, and that would be great. I mean, these guys fighting in these battles in the Overland Campaign, fighting at Petersburg, and then the siege life.
Well, I think of the first main story at Petersburg, which talk about a sobering moment. I went to Petersburg for the first time about a year ago, or a year and a half ago now. And it was in January. I went down there, and I had to see the first main monument. And it's a big monument, and it's huge in the fact that they put the name of every single guy that lost his life there. Yeah. And a long, long list. And it's really something. It was really windy that day, but like everything kind of got quiet. You know, when I got to that part of the battlefield, and I just tried to picture like where and everything happened. But that alone is a heart-wrenching story that could be told. And gosh, yeah, there's so many. But I want to remind people too, and I've gotten way better at this in the last couple of years, but like as a kid getting into regimental histories, or by the time I first started, I just wanted to hear about the battles. And like if I found out about a regiment, like, oh, this regiment just spent 3 years in garrison, boring. Let me go see somebody else. But now I'm like, I want to hear about what these guys like. Yeah, I don't care where they like. Now I want to hear like, oh, this regiment did 4 years garrison. Yeah, I'll read their regimental history. Let me see what they did. And it's a reminder for everyone that just because a unit may not have seen as much action, stuff happened, desertions happen. And when I was reading, I own all the regimental histories of the major heavy artillery regiments, and I came across so many anecdotes, you know, where guys get into trouble in town, you know, crazy stuff happening, or desertions happening, or executions happening, like all these dramatic things. And I remember one story. It was so, I can't remember which one it is. Well, I always say this. I hear a story and I forget which book I got it from. But it was this whole story of these drummer boys in a heavy artillery unit going around secretly playing a card game in one of like the outbuildings. And one of the kids had a pistol, and he lost the card game. And as a joke, it was a joke, they wanted to act like they were cowboys or whatever, and he pulled out this gun, and he was like, "Ah, you cheater!" And he goes to pull the trigger, and he didn't realize it was actually loaded, and he blew one of his buddies away. And the poor boy was absolutely devastated, and it turned into this whole traumatic ordeal. No one could believe it, and the poor kid never recovered from it. I think he went. As an adult, like he went crazy. Anyway, but like when I hear like a little anecdote, like I'm just like, you could put that in a TV show. And it just shows you that things happen. Men die somehow. Like they said, they had many men die in the first year just from chopping trees down, and accidents in the storm, or accidents with, you know. So somehow in wartime, men still find ways to die.
Sure.
And they show that in Band of Brothers, in the sense where the war is over and they're still in Europe. They're not going home yet.
Car
guys
accidents,
are dying in car accidents and stuff. So,
or somebody gets drunk and starts, shooting
so it's
up
not exactly boring times.
Yeah.
You know, so
well, Patton died. Well, he was. Yeah, that's just. It's the luck of the draw. But no, there's some good stories there. I mean, it's just hard to pick.
It is
a particular. I mean, I think you got to have a really good, compelling story, or you could do a vignette, a specific vignette like the Red Badge of Courage, and you're talking about 3 days, maybe 2 or 3 days in the life of a man or a company or a regiment in a particular battle, and you could get hyper focused on that, and you could probably pull that off pretty well. If you cared about the history that much. So,
well, one other fantasy idea I have is, especially I'm a Gettysburg guru, but I would love a mini series, and I know Gettysburg's already been done, but one new light would be a mini series literally on the town of Gettysburg and civilians during the 3 days. Or the 4 or 5 days, and it's like, show the background of all the prominent civilians of Gettysburg. That's compelling on its own. There's so much drama there with Jenny Wade's story and John Burns' story and Elizabeth Thorne's story. And there's so much drama. But like, you could do a small cast. And I would love if they could just recreate the town of Gettysburg. And then there could be episodes and scenes where somebody's helping a soldier in a basement. Confederates here, this and that. There could be a segment on the African Americans community, them hiding and trying to get, I think there's a lot of compelling stuff right there that you can make a little mini series.
You could start it. Really start it on June 15th when they hear that the rebels are crossing the river, and then you go through the when they're in Chambersburg, and then the June 26th when Gordon's brigade comes, and the Confederate cavalry comes through, and the raid, and they're rounding people up, and then those days between when they are cut off, when the Rebs cut the telegraph lines and they tear up the tracks, and it's like, we don't know what's going on other than, oh, look, here comes cavalry. And then, Kilpatrick just rides through and leaves them. And then Buford comes, and then the battle.
But then you also have the militia, like the 26th
right,
Emergency Regiment story.
Yep.
And then the aftermath of battle and people, children, having accidents on the battlefield. Like there's so much drama there that and the grand finale of that series could be the Gettysburg Address, But like, I don't know. That's always have different ideas floating around. But
yeah, and then depending on how you feel about Tilly Pierce and her accuracy, I mean, she would be a huge part of that story.
Yeah, she would.
So yeah,
that's great. There's so much. What about you, man? Do you have, we talked about a lot of what our thoughts are on regiments, but like, do you have like a fantasy or an event that you would like to see recreated in a movie or TV series mode?
I think I have several, I guess. I don't know that a movie, just thinking about it from like if I'm a producer or if I'm somebody, I'm trying to conceptualize a movie that's going to be a hit and make money. There's probably some stories. I think that the miniseries, kind of maybe the independent movie, would be probably more approachable, but as it kind of goes back to the way that, like we talked on the last one, it's like if there's a place in the Civil War that you could go and watch and see, and what it actually looked like. Yeah. I think First Manassas is a really cool one. Just to see it actually done right. Manassas has been done, and I was thinking about this the other day, at least 5 or 6 times on film.
I think the Blue and the Gray did it.
Blue and the Gray.
Gods and Generals.
North and South.
Yeah.
And there's another one I can't remember, but
there's probably been a few.
It's several big, but that's like that's the first battle, and I think you can get, this is the loss of innocence kind of thing, right? That would be good. I mean, Gettysburg, of course, is a compelling story. Well, the Antietam miniseries, which we've only, unless because I know they released it on, was it History Fix or whatever? They've released the whole thing apparently. Oh, wow. If you have a subscription to that, you can see it. It's been redone. They've redone some of the animations and stuff, but there are bits on YouTube. And you're finally seeing this thing after 20 years, 25 years of filming it all those years ago, and now it's on. You can see parts of it. There's some compelling stories. I think it's hard. It would be hard to get a big blockbuster movie about something more than just like one battle or one personality in a battle. And I think a movie like Lincoln, for instance, the Steven Spielberg Lincoln movie, that would be interesting to do from maybe a Confederate perspective, to see the workings of the Confederate government, Jefferson Davis at work, and some of those guys maybe, and his interaction with Robert E. Lee, for instance. I still think I think that would be really cool, and it's something that we really didn't get with Gods and Generals. With Gods and Generals. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, you have, it's the Stonewall Jackson story. Yeah. And Robert E. Lee gets a few cameos in it. Yeah. James Longstreet, we don't have Tom Berenger anymore. Yeah. But
Bruce Boxall.
Bruce is in it and does a fine job, but is in it for like 2 seconds.
I know.
Stewart's a little bit more in the movie than he was in Gettysburg. But
he may as well have been called Stonewall.
Stonewall. Yeah. Stonewall Jackson and his frolicking with children and drinking lemonade, kind of thing.
My Esposita.
Yeah, that's the joke. But a true, actually, I will say, the Valley Campaign. Stonewall Jackson's Valley Campaign.
And that's not even in the movie.
Not even in the movie.
Yeah.
I don't even remember it.
Really compelling stuff.
I don't even remember it being a big part in the book. It's just something that kind of...
First of all, the book and movie are almost nothing alike.
Nothing alike. Well, the book starts in the mid 1850s.
I think so.
And goes up. But I mean, there are whole battle sequences that are not in the book that... some of them put in the movie and then others are out. Yeah. But the Valley Campaign would be fascinating because you got Jackson, his whole staff, as another big piece that was missing on Jackson's staff is Henry Kidd Douglas.
That's right.
Not in the,
and he wrote a book.
Yep.
I mean, he wrote a whole memoir.
Just like Sam Watkins, he exaggerates
he sure did,
the majority of what he did, but a fascinating character nonetheless.
Yeah.
Jedediah Hotchkiss, and then some of these other, like Isaac Trimble, Richard Ewell, Turner Ashby before he gets killed. Well, he gets killed in the Valley, I think. And
he did.
A lot of these, I think that would be kind of
They're
an
just
interesting.
too many sometimes.
Yeah.
There's really too many characters.
Yeah.
To give everybody it, but no, you're right.
It would be interesting, and that would be cool because then you would have a beautiful landscape, wide sweeping vistas, really neat looking battle scenes that wouldn't have to involve 10,000 people. You could do a small scale because it wasn't a huge thing. That would be interesting.
And you have Mosby's Rangers. That could be
Mosby's Rangers,
an element of that show. And that's a good point. Like, I'll be honest, like in my early days, I got a lot of my history from movies before I got to really digging deeper as I got older. But when I saw Gods and Jones for the first time, I had no idea the Valley Campaign existed.
Yeah.
Because I followed everything because they really do follow almost every major event in the East, except the Valley Campaign.
Except
if
the
you
Valley
want to,
Campaign.
and they don't cover. I'd say that they don't cover Second Manassas. They don't cover the 7 days.
Or any of the Peninsula Campaign.
Yes, there's
really.
a lot. There's a lot that they don't cover. And Balls Bluff, that's not in there. But like, there's so many random things. The McClellan, all the Peninsula Campaign. So but of all those campaigns, the Valley is just maybe the most dramatic, little compelling chapter there because it all takes place in a small area and that has the makings of a Braveheart type or Patriot type film where this is where Stonewall is really getting his reputation of outsmarting the enemy and hit and run. And, it's like, I don't know, it's interesting. And anything that involves Harper's Ferry, I'm a fan of.
Well, and there are other elements to that story too. I mean, that there's a book, what's it called? Something, but Jeffrey Wirt is the author, and he wrote a book, and it was basically like a side-by-side telling of the history of the Stonewall Brigade and the Iron Brigade. And it's like they met each other like 3 or 4 times on the battlefield, and he's telling the story. And one of the chapters is pretty much dedicated because the Iron Brigade wasn't doing anything during the Valley Campaign. It's just on the Valley Campaign. And at the end of the chapter, he talks about how the sheer number of desertions that occurred in the Stonewall Brigade during that campaign, not only because it was hard, but because a lot of these guys were near home. They just went home and never went back, or they went back and joined another unit later or something. It's interesting. And then you think about Jackson and, oh man, he got out of there. Man, he was the best general. And then he goes in the 7 days and, does the S word in the bed with Robert E. Lee and the Army, and to the point where Lee almost supposedly thought about reassigning him because it's like Magruder or somebody's like, man, I can't. This guy was terrible. I can't rely on it. But then then he's like, okay, sure, and so he promotes Longstreet, and then he promotes Jackson the next day, which people forget. Yeah, James Longstreet is a superior officer to Stonewall Jackson. Yeah. He was the second in command of that army for the whole time, and people, you watch Gods and Generals, and you get the impression, oh, it's just Jackson. It's just Jackson.
That's the danger too, right?
Yeah.
And Gettysburg, in a way, is guilty of a few things like that, where a lot of people literally get all their history from movies, and I hate it. Is if a movie can get you introduced and inspired to learn more, that's great. But a lot of people, they just watch a movie and they're done.
They don't take it.
They don't
further,
read into it. And so, like, for instance, there's some characters, personalities that get hate in Gettysburg, and we can think of Ewell and Jeb Stuart and some of these people that people just go like, oh, wow, Jeb Stuart was just an idiot, or Ewell was a complete idiot, and or like, there's so many missing factors too. I mean, Gettysburg can't cover everything, but like, there's even Gettysburg, like, they don't cover the wheat field, the peach orchard. Like, also, hello. The most, and it's not even really in the book either, but one of the most dramatic pieces of Gettysburg is the whole Sickles story. It's still one of the most controversial topics in battle studies. That personality character is just so Hollywood. It's like something like that. Like, I can't believe they didn't feature the peach orchard or sickles in there. And there are just so many other elements that they could have done in Gettysburg. Um, yeah, there's so many people that just, Little Round Top gets flooded every year with people, and hopefully soon they'll be reopening it again. But I just, like, it's always upsetting, which I love Little Round Top. You can't beat the views and everything. But now, the longer I've gone to study, like, I appreciate every inch of that ground now. And whether it's the first day battlefield is one of my favorite places to go now. And I have the place to myself. If I go to, like, the first day, if I go to, like, Oak Ridge, or if I go to Oak Hill over there, or McPherson's Ridge, Hare's Ridge, or, like, all these different things, it's like there's not many activity. There is right there by the Lee's headquarters and everything, that whole area and the little visitor center they have there. But you go over to the Peace Light, or you go over to Oak Ridge, and you can have some peaceful moments there. Just sitting.
Absolutely.
So there's just so many other elements that people forget about because it's just not in the movie.
No.
And so they don't know about it.
And what's in the movie is
gospel.
Something that never actually occurred ever. Is weird. Yeah. That was probably, I will say, to that point about getting your history from the movie and then finding out the history. Because you have this perception of Buford, he's making this Spartan defense. Nah, man, this guy was setting up his guys. They would fire a few shots, jump on their horses, and run to the next ridge, and then just kind of do this. And the Confederates are like, "What is going on?" And they're just like, no real opposition. They're just, well, slow down, I guess, and figure out what's in front of us. And then, boom, here comes the Iron Brigade. Here comes Cutler's Brigade and the First Corps. But yeah, that whatever that was. I mean, I understand. You have to cut corners in a movie. You have to make something, but that would have been hard, I guess.
He loses more men in the movie than he did in
way
the battle.
way more. And he's inflicting enormous losses on the Confederates, and it's like they didn't suffer hardly any losses fighting Buford until they hit the infantry. Yeah. But it's still cool. It still sets up a neat, like,
it does.
There's General Reynolds, and thank God, the devil's to pay, and all this kind of stuff. Yeah. And it is cool to see that. But
it is. One of my favorite parts of Gettysburg is the campaign study element, where the lead up.
Yeah.
Like, I love all the scenes building towards it. Like, you understand the movements of the army and where they're going and where they're heading and the logistics. And it's kind of, it reminds me, I wonder if you've seen the old classic Waterloo movie.
I've seen
from 1970.
Bits of it. Sure. Yeah.
It is worth a watch. If you watch it, it's done. The whole movie is done in the Gettysburg style.
Yeah.
And I wonder sometimes if the filmmakers for Gettysburg were inspired by that movie in any way, because just the way it's done and everything's depicted and certain generals they feature.
A lot of build up in that movie too, to getting to the battle. His escape from Elba and everything.
Yeah, and the battles are full scale in that movie too.
That's what's really neat about it.
Yeah. So what about some of these random DVDs here that we have?
We have. We talked about Gods and Generals.
Andersonville.
How
do you feel about that?
When I first saw it, of course, as a kid, I was eating it up. That was right when I was into the Civil War. What was it, Andersonville? 95? It was 96?
95, 96.
Let's see. I don't see it on here, but yeah, it was something like that. Yeah, 95, 96.
You know what? Somebody told me this. I know so many guys who were like extras in that movie, and I finally remember somebody telling me that
96.
It was released in 96, but like they had filmed it like 3 or 4 years.
Oh, okay. So
it took a long time to release.
They're trying to take advantage of the Gettysburg, thing. Because that was a big. It was kind of a surprise hit, and some of these movies do end up. I mean, going back to Braveheart. Braveheart was a surprise. That was an indie film that Mel took on and directed, and then it ended up winning 5 Oscars and all this kind of stuff. And so sometimes they do, but I really like Andersonville. Like, I forgot about it for years, and just stopped watching it. And then I came back and was like, this was actually really good, and it's good from a regimental perspective. I was thinking about that, because the main characters are 19th Massachusetts. That's not a overly famous, but it's from a very famous unit, the Second Corps. And those scenes are, the material culture, honestly, in this exceeds Gettysburg by 2 or 3 times, I think. Even though it's not perfect, the Union, the Federal, like the uniforms and the material culture is way better. And then, there's a Pennsylvania coal miners regiment that they befriend, and there's some guys
the Iron
from the
Brigade guys.
Yeah, second Wisconsin guys, and that's neat because throughout the movie you get that association with the regiment, and there's that ridiculous, famous scene towards the end, but it's ridiculous. It's like, we're recruiting men to join the Confederacy, and the sergeant's like, everyone in the 19th Massachusetts, about face, and they all turn into their regiments and march away from the Confederates or whatever. But that's a very regiment specific,
and a good soldier life one.
Yeah,
too. Yeah, that is a good.
Yeah,
one.
I do. I enjoy it. And yeah, I mean, I think it's good. I mean, the depiction of the Confederates isn't great, other than William H. Macy, but
I forget about that.
Yeah, he's like the Inspector General or whatever.
Yeah, that's right.
But no, there's some good classic lines of, what do you call this piece of heaven?
Yeah,
this is Andersonville.
yes.
And
then who's with me and the whole, the fight against the what do I call those guys?
The Raiders. The Raiders. Yeah. I thought it was the Raiders.
It's worth a watch.
It's a fun, and it's very bleak too. I mean, they do a good job of showing how it just.
I feel like I'm starving and dying after I watch that movie.
Worse and worse. Yeah,
I know. I feel drained after I watch it.
But another scene that I do like is the scene. It's after they take out the Raiders, and they're hung and everything, and it's in the middle of a downpour. And there's like a couple of guys come in, and they're like, some new guys. Where are you from? I've been with Billy Sherman. I've been Grant with Virginia. So this is Andersonville. Yep, this is it. And they're telling something about that is just funny. Like
you get that soldier interaction
exactly.
Too. And that's the stuff that we like because we're used to that. We get a taste of that when we're reenacting. We read these personal accounts and diaries, and we get that little day-to-day conversation. So a lot of times these war epics don't bring it down to that scale. But, for that matter, are there any films that we haven't, films that may not be a household DVD, but are there any Civil War films that you've come across that people don't know about that you kind of like, hey, that wasn't bad. That was a pretty good one.
I don't know. I'd have to. I'm going to start talking about Blue and the Gray here in a minute, or North and South. But I will say before we go off into the funny, the fun aspects. The Outlaw Josey Wales.
Yeah,
love that movie.
Yeah,
it's barely
a classic Western,
barely a Civil War movie, but it is at its heart, it is a Civil War movie, and there's a great line at the end. And it kind of, because it starts out as a Civil War, and then it just becomes sort of a Western, and the Comanches and all this kind of stuff. And then at the end, Red Legs, that's revenge. Yeah. But then at the end, they're standing there, and Fletcher knows that it's Josey Wales, and they know each other, but they're just standing. They're not going to do anything about it. And he says, I think I'm going to go down to Mexico and try and find him and tell him the war is over. What do you think? And he's like, reckon so. Reckon we all died a little in that damn war. And that's a cool, for some reason, that's always stuck with me as like this kind of thing that I think all of the veterans probably knew. It's like, it was bad, and we can all recognize that. Yeah. And there's so much in that you don't have to say, and he's talking about the Civil War and all this kind. No. You just know, like, he went through some stuff, like saying, like, talking to Eugene Sledge about the Pacific, there's you can have a one-liner and exactly what you're talking about. So that's a cool, good. Like just on the fringes, but you get a sense of the war, and of course the boat ride scene where he's alternately singing Dixie or the Battle Hymn of the That's so funny.
But that's a real kind of, like, I could see that in an old period novel or something. That
exactly.
Seems like a little.
Oh, that show is the sweet sound of the years. Yeah. Wouldn't you say so, Mr. Wales? I'll try and hold on. Yeah.
No,
and then halfway across,
I forget.
Mine eyes have seen the glory.
And then his buddy sings the Rose of Alabama. When the guys are coming up.
And for those of you Seinfeld fans out there, one of the guys is Uncle Leo from Seinfeld.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
he's
He's in a lot of stuff, that guy. He's a character.
What's he talking about?
Yeah.
Tell him to shut up.
Yeah. Man, yeah, I forgot about Josey. You see, you never know what movie you're going to end up talking about.
Yeah.
But I do have to share one random movie that's right behind you. I think the one called The Colt. And this is, I don't think, I've never heard anyone that's seen this, like, besides me. But
yeah, I haven't seen it.
It was a Hallmark film. I think it's Ryan. Is it Ryan Merriman?
Ryan Merriman.
Disney actor. He was a popular Disney actor back in the early 2000s, I think. And so this Hallmark movie came out called The Colt, and it's based on a original short story, I think. And it's one of those inspirational stories where a Union and Confederate soldier both save this colt in the middle of this skirmish. But the movie takes place during the Wilderness Campaign, and it's a squadron of the Michigan Cavalry, Custer's Brigade, and it's one of the few that kind of just, to me, captures also the day-to-day of a rugged cavalryman on campaign. And they do a good job. It's a hokey, kind of heartwarming type story, but in the middle of it, and there's a guy that's following the unit that's a sketch artist, news correspondent.
Oh, okay.
And that's that's an interesting element because we know that happened. They had guys doing that. And so I like that part. And it's worth a watch to me. I mean, it's a squad on squad type film. You can tell it was low budget, but I just like how we can also go on a tangent about John Wayne, cavalry movies, and there's so many Civil War ones that he did. But I like how The Colt just shows just that rugged day to day cavalryman, and it was a rugged life. And there's also one over there that we all know, The Horse Soldiers.
Yep.
With John Wayne, based on Grierson's raid. Right? I think it's loosely based on Grierson's raid, and there's a lot of events in that are based on real historic events and battles and stuff in Mississippi. But that's another one that you could talk about as a good brigade level study, maybe, And I don't know if you have you seen that one?
I've seen it. It was years ago.
Yeah.
A long time ago. Yeah.
A lot of people love that.
Some really cool classic. I mean, how are you going to beat John Wayne?
I know.
It's just it's fun.
How many times can John Wayne say forward?
Partner. These are you got some good classic movies. Then you have your Civil War combat and your
I just threw some documentaries in there.
Documentaries, but that counts too.
Which were you? So you were in some films, right?
I was in
documentaries.
Just the Chickamauga film that they have at the Visitor Center.
Yeah. And what scene were you in, or what'd you do in that one?
I did both sides. I was
everybody did, right?
Part of the Confederate breakthrough. There's a big shot of the Confederate breakthrough, and we're coming through the Dyer Field on the second day or third day, depending on how you want to count it. Yeah. And then really, I'm more in the federal scenes because a lot of I think really they were filming us as kind of a generic, federal unit in the woods fighting, and that has ended up, a lot of my close-up shots have ended up in. There was a series several years ago, the Unknown Civil War, and it was on PBS, and it's a lot of the Western theater battles. And, a lot of my close-ups have been in different battle scenes that they depict in that. So, did that. And then we did the scene with Van Pelt's battery at Chickamauga being overrun. And I was in the 10th Wisconsin, and that regiment, they've driven off some Confederates, and then Liddell's division comes up and they lay down their battery support, but they lay down so Van Pelt can fire over their heads at these Confederates. But because the guys had their knapsacks on, they could only get off one volley. And then when the Confederates close in, the 10th just got up and ran. Yeah. And Van Pelt's battery got overrun. So I was in that scene. That was actually a really fun scene to shoot. Yeah, that was really cool. Because that was neat. And that was actually the way they filmed it, because you're not supposed to have two sides on the battlefield shooting at each other. You can have them marching and you can get the impression of combat, but you can't. They can't be shooting. So we would have the smoke machines go through, and then there's a couple of shots of you can see me on the ground and guys next to us in the line, and we're like, this. And then the Confederate line's 100 yards away moving closer. And it was really cool. Like, they can have smoke and machines, explosions, but you can't shoot at each other. But, you get the impression of combat when you edit it together.
And, well, shout out to one of my pards, Herb Coates, who played an officer in a couple scenes. And in the Chattanooga scenes, or the Missionary Ridge scene, like he's literally... in one shot, he's leading the charge for the Union up the ridge. In the very next shot, he's a Confederate running away from the ridge. It's so funny. Like, you literally see him in a Union uniform running up, and then he runs down the other side.
Yeah,
it's a Confederate. So
Herb.
So yeah, but
it's funny.
I literally just missed all those. Like I got into the hobby like right after, or no, I was already in the hobby, but I didn't know. I didn't have the right connections yet.
Yeah.
So
well, you got to do the filming this past September, though, right? At Antietam.
Yeah, I did. I think Wide Awake Films did that, and it was in partnership with the American Battlefield Trust, and we did a lot of like stock footage type things. And so I know I'm kind of waiting to see like maybe one of these days I'll come across a random documentary. It's like, oh, that's me getting shot.
Exactly.
So that's kind of fun. But,
yeah.
I mean, but I know. We're already getting close to a wrap up, but you want to talk a little bit about like Blue and the Gray.
Let's have some fun.
Yeah.
Well, what's your? You've seen both. You've seen Blue and the Gray.
I have not.
You haven't seen Blue and the Gray?
No. I've seen Blue and the Gray, but I never saw North and South.
You know?
I know.
Okay,
I know.
so
Don't get mad at me, people.
Blue and the Gray. That was kind of like Gettysburg. That was one of the first ones that I watched because the VHS was available, and I wore that thing out. And that's a fun, very hokey, ridiculous story. But regiments, the Hales are in the 23rd Pennsylvania. I don't remember where the 23rd was in relation to everything else.
That was Bernie's Zouaves, right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It was in Bernie's division. Okay.
I think so.
But I mean, actually kind of a not cool, but, fun depiction of First Manassas. I remember we did a reenactment. It was back when they were doing some of those big adjuncts in the mid 2000s. And it was summer of '62. And this was a Second Manassas adjunct. And it wasn't like a mainstream reenactment and then we were tagged on. It was a progressive, so you had some mainstream units and you had a lot of authentic units, and they did like a Cedar Mountain scenario, Bronner's Farm, then like the railroad cut. And the Bronner's Farm one was cool. Got to do Iron Brigade.
Nice.
That was probably the best experience I've ever had. It was a powder burn, but no civilians, no spectators. It had rained, so the smoke hung on the field, and you were choking. And everyone was screaming and shooting. And it was the closest thing to what you hear people describe combat to be like. But during the Cedar Mountain scenario, we were, I think we were supposed to be Lane's Brigade. So, A.P. Hill's division, James Lane's North Carolinians.
Yeah.
And I can't remember who it was. It was somebody I'm sure that we know in the hobby was playing Stonewall, and they had the cap and the uniform and everything. He had grown out the beard. And he rides up, and it's like, all right, General, bring your brigade forward, just as kind of, to be more immersive kind of thing. And the guys in our unit, he rides up, and then they're quoting lines from the Blue and the Gray. And there's that great scene at Manassas where, one of John's brothers, he's in the Virginia Artillery, and he's like, "It's Jackson," and then the guy playing Jackson's like, "Fall back to the fence, fall back to the fence." And so they start spouting off these lines, and it's just so ridiculous. Yeah. But it's a part of that that's like, man, it was fun, like just to enjoy that movie. Of course, it's got some ridiculous. I mean, Stacy Keach being everywhere, and
and
the dead eye shot that he was all the time.
They have to pack in everything.
Yeah,
but like I could be wrong, but I went to the Prairie Grove battlefield in Arkansas, and when I was there, my friends were telling me that some of the Blue and Gray was filmed there.
Oh, okay.
Because once again, I was like, I recognize some of the stuff, and I can't remember if it was Blue and Gray North and South, But I think they said that the first Manassas battle scenes in blue and gray were filmed at Prairie Grove.
Okay, well that makes now I remember seeing that pretty much all of the blue and the gray was filmed in Arkansas.
No, okay.
So that would have to be it.
That was it then.
Yeah,
yeah. They did some scenes there. Yeah,
but I mean, it's not. I mean, Gregory Peck is Abraham Lincoln, pretty solid, solid casting. Sterling Hayden as John Brown was really, an actor with gravitas, and that's.
And who was the actor that played the crazy preacher?
Oh Lord, yeah.
He was.
Oh man,
or was it?
Yeah, the guy that always whistled "Rock of Ages" or whatever before he killed Yankees
in the wilderness.
Yeah.
Right?
But yeah, Stacy Keach, Lloyd Bridges.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. There were some other people in that. I can't remember who.
Yeah, there's a few.
Oh well, Cooper Huckabee plays one of John. I think he's Matthew, and he plays Harrison in Gettysburg.
Right. Yeah,
and he's been in some other things over the years too. But it's a fun. Yeah, it's a fun little thing. But I tell you what. I watched North and South again not long ago. You haven't seen it, but you can find it on YouTube.
Yeah.
Just the whole episodes are on YouTube. It's 3 parts. There's the first book, which is the antebellum years. Then you have the second book, which is the war. And then book 3 is like Reconstruction. I prefer the first one, the antebellum years, because I think the story is more compelling. They actually do a very good job of throwing in as many historical details as possible. Okay. Interestingly, even though it's kind of hokey, there's a lot of stuff that they really tried to be as, just immersive in the history as possible.
Sure.
Regimental wise, I can't remember Patrick Swayze and what's his James Hurd, who played George. I can't remember. They're in some regular U.S. regiment when they're in Mexico together.
Oh yeah.
And Patrick Swayze gets wounded. I think it's Churubusco is the battle, but whatever regiment they're supposed to be in.
I didn't realize they featured Mexican one.
Oh yeah. Wow. Well, it starts as them going to West Point together, and they become friends at West Point, and then they're in Mexico, and then they marry, and they're. Because Swayze's nephew goes to West Point and George's younger brother, they become best friends at West Point, and then, they're intermarrying, and then it's like, oh, the war, what are we going to do? George, you can't ask me to change our way of life here, and, all this kind of, and then Kirstie Alley plays the crazy abolitionist, and oh man, there's some really cool. David Carradine is this evil plantation owner.
Oh, wow.
Who's neighbors with Patrick Swayze, but then he marries Patrick Swayze's love, and he's abusive. And in the second movie, he has to go home to South Carolina and kill David Carradine in 1862. And we can be together again. And But there's some. There was a podcast. And they were, Jonathan Frakes from Star Trek was in that.
Yeah.
And he plays George's older brother. And he told a story that when because they filmed most of it in South Carolina, and they had a big hotel where all the actors were staying.
Sure. And
one night he goes up and they had a rooftop bar, and David Carradine and Patrick Swayze, high. They've been who knows what they've been drunken high.
Yeah.
And they're yelling at each other. And it's I tell you that window right there, I can fly. I will, if I jump out of that window, I can fly. And it's no, screw you. I can fly. And he said them and the rest of the cast had to tackle both David Carradine and Patrick Swayze from jumping out of that window because they were going to leap to their deaths, who knows, drunk, high, whatever.
Oh, wow.
But, yeah.
I got to watch it. I know. I should.
It's fun. It's very melodramatic, but it's fun. The only other regimental thing I will say is that the George's younger brother, who's a Yankee, but he is in. I don't remember it's the first or the second U.S. sharpshooters, and he's in there throughout the.
Oh wow!
So in the battle scenes, he's wearing the green, and he's got the. It's almost like a repeating rifle as quickly as he shoots, but he's like a dead eye the whole time too, and all that stuff. But the only regimental thing I can think of, but that's from 1862 until the surrender. Billy Hazard is in the sharpshooters, and he's doing all this stuff. So
oh, that's great. But And that was me. Was that in the 80s?
It was in the 80s.
Yeah.
Yeah. The music is, classic, very grand, dramatic, melodramatic stuff.
Yeah.
And, but it's a fun story. Ridiculous.
Yeah.
But, the whole West Point dynamic, about best friends, one of them's from South Carolina, one of them's from Pennsylvania. And it's like, George and Ori, well, I can't support slavery, but we have to put that aside for our friendship and all this guy. That's a cool. Because that did happen.
It did,
and that's an interesting aspect of it.
I think the forgotten aspect that just doesn't get told in a lot of these war. It's like every war film, or every Civil War film just has the recipe that it has to be a prominent Southern plantation guy, or it needs to be a Union guy, or there needs to be an abolitionist character, or there needs to be a African American storyline, and so you have all the pieces. But like sometimes it's like, let's have a war film that's literally just about a normal dude, a poor guy or a guy that's like
that's not going to have some kind of social commentary.
Well,
what was the movie about the field of shoes?
Field of Lost Shoes. Yeah, that was about the VMI cadets.
The cadets. Well, they have to have that in the movie too, and it's like, okay. It's not a great movie, but still,
that was one that I could have been an extra in.
Oh, really?
I knew a big group of guys that were going, and they're like, "Hey, come with us, man," because they filmed that right like the week before the 150th of Gettysburg, and I couldn't get off work for it, and I had all this other stuff going on, and I'm glad I didn't, because I think if I had gone, I probably would have been dead before this. We all know how national events will wear you out because there's so much walking, and the heat was insane. So like I'm kind of I'm glad that I just did the reenactment.
Well, in those film shoots, if they're trying to film a specific scene, like a specific thing, they will do it over and over and over and over again. Like we filmed that breakthrough scene at least a dozen times. So you're talking 15, 20 minutes minimum for one advance, get back to one, get in position, move the cameras, whatever.
And then sometimes some films can take advantage of reenactors. Sometimes we've seen it before where they think we're just expendable. But exactly. Guys get tired. We get tired pretty quick.
Guys get tired. Well, that's why it's best to have it's best to pay us.
Yeah.
And it's best to get guys that are in shape, because not only does it look better on camera, you get more use out of them. Yeah. So that's my thinking. It's like, you want to get a bunch of reenactors, great. Do really big scenes, but if you want good close-ups, just pay the money. Get 150 extras that look. Yeah. That's another thing, and very quickly, I will say this movie, Lincoln. Steven Spielberg's great. Daniel Day-Lewis, fantastic job. There's one part of that movie that has always kind of stuck with me, and it stuck with me particularly because he's become a big star. Adam Driver plays the guy in the telegraph office. Back then, he was like barely known, but I think Spielberg, and this is a problem with a lot of movies, and Mel Gibson, I think, understands this, and the way he casts for his movies, he gets people that look unique. Yeah. I think you've got to cast unique looking people, because if you cast a bunch of movie stars, they look like we do, like people today. Yeah. But Adam Driver, he's kind of an odd looking duck. He's got the big nose and the facial structure. But if you watch him in that movie, have you ever seen The Last Duel, the Ridley Scott movie? It came out 2 years ago. Yeah. Another movie that didn't do very well in the box office, but is actually really cool, like great aesthetic, great historical aesthetic. But you totally buy him as a historical character, because he doesn't look like he doesn't look like Ben Affleck or Matt Damon, doesn't look like Brad Pitt trying to be this character. Even though another movie that's sort of on the fringes of Civil War is the assassination of Jesse James.
Oh, yeah. By the coward Robert Ford.
Yeah. I love that movie. And, you get little bits of old Civil War stuff.
Oh, my gosh. That just reminded me. another shout out. Ride with the Devil.
Never saw it.
You
I've
need
never
to,
seen it.
because this is what I agree on, and I had several friends recommend it until I finally saw it. And what that one gets right is the appearance and the dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the way they talk in that movie is very authentic.
Okay.
Period. There's not many. That's another thing. There's a lot of war films that just, you know, they
go naturally.
They talk modern,
outdated.
or,
Yeah.
you know, but like it's kind of like, okay, have you seen the new True Grit, the newer
Yes.
True Grit?
Yeah.
And you know the way they talk in
Mm-hmm.
that, and they're talking truer to like the way it's spelled out in the novel,
Mm-hmm.
but like they really harp on the dialect of the time. And so Ride with the Devil really, like, it feels time period, and it's worth a watch. You know, it's not
Okay.
there's not like a bunch of battle scene. You know, like, it's not your archetypical war film, but it's great. Like, I was
Okay.
really just the appearance and the dialogue.
Yeah.
Kind of like you brought up Daniel Day-Lewis here too, but I wonder how you feel about Gangs in New York, because that one, again, it's one of my favorite movies, mainly because of Daniel Day-Lewis.
Yeah.
Because just the way
No,
he portrays that
it's
character.
a
But
fun. Yeah.
it's
a
also
fun
one of the
movie.
few home front type war
Mm-hmm.
films. Yes, there's a lot of craziness in that movie, but one thing I remember hearing about was Daniel Day-Lewis patterned his accent and all that on old recordings of Walt Whitman, I think.
Okay.
Like, there was some of the earliest known recordings to man was like Walt Whitman in like the 1890s or something.
Wow.
Or
Okay.
early 1900s.
Now that's that. Now
there was something.
I did not know that, but I'm going to look that up,
And
because that's.
I could be
Yeah.
wrong. It may not have been Walt. It was some prominent New Yorker from the time, and so he listened to those tapes and he just patterned the kind of accent that he had.
I have no doubt that he got that right.
But like, so I think what makes that film, the only thing that really, just how true Daniel Day-Lewis goes into his characters, and so I mean, I think the best thing that gets right is just the total insanity and unruly lives that people had in the big cities at that
Sure.
point, especially New York, and the draft riots. Like, to me, it really just captures, you know, the craziness of the riots, you know. But I know they kind of overdo a lot of stuff in that movie, but I don't know. That's one that's kind of interesting.
Well,
but,
Daniel Day-Lewis, I mean, you can't
Yeah.
beat him. I mean, he does an incredible Lincoln, I think.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
some of those scenes are just, I mean, because, you know, you hear the descriptions of how Lincoln talked, and nobody has a recording of how Lincoln talked. But other than
Yeah.
Sam Waterston, I will say, Sam Waterston does a fantastic Lincoln, and he's done it since the Ken Burns series. But then, you know, he did this one. This was, I think it was a mini series, right? With Mary Tyler Moore.
Yeah, I think so.
That was really good. I mean, he's a master. He knows that. And so he played it kind of the higher pitched.
Sure.
But, you know, Daniel Day-Lewis, man, he's
know.
great.
Isn't that something you could do in your crazy spare time? Is just look at a picture of a historical figure or a general and just stare at it for a while and just try to imagine, what would this dude sound like?
Yeah.
What did
Yeah.
Longstreet sound like?
Yeah.
What did Chamberlain really sound like? Or what did Lee sound like? You know, you could just really just like look at a picture.
I have a feeling that the guy that did the voice for Lee in the Ken Burns series nailed it.
Yeah.
I will never think of Robert E. Lee sounding
It's
any
been
other
so
way
long.
than that.
I need to look back on
It's a
that.
very yeah. I think he did a great job there. I think Sam Waterston and Daniel Day-Lewis do a great Lincoln.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Wow. Well, I know we've gone over time. I think it's so easy to when you get to talking movies, and I'm sure there's so many more movies that we could
go
talk
on
about.
and
You can leave the ones in the comments that we didn't talk about, and share your opinions and thoughts on some of these. But this was fun. Yeah, you could do. We could do a mini series just talking about all the movies, but no, this was fun, Ryan, to talk about a lot of our favorite films, and we didn't even really deep dive into Glory like we could have. I mean, really, honestly, Glory. To sum it up, Glory is one of the best Civil War films. Period.
Yeah.
It shows the life of a whole regiment. And it just captures enough of every topic in the war, and it's a motivational movie, and it really is a story needs to be told, and that's why, like, I think Glory is so good that some people have not tried to recreate or remake that too, because it's just.
And I hope they don't, because that's a
great
classic.
Denzel Washington and Morgan Freeman. Like, you watch it just for their acting in it. I mean, Denzel Washington is incredible in that movie.
Still, a scene that will always give me chills. I mean, I went through, and I've had this conversation not long ago. It's like there's a couple of scenes in movies that will always, give me chill bumps. The scene in The Lion King, after he, at the end, he defeats Scar and he's going up on the Pride Rock and the music swelling and it's raining and he roars.
See, Lion King shout out.
Lion King shout out. Return of the Jedi, when Luke does the front flip off of the sail barge and catches that green lightsaber the music. That's a good one. The scene where Vito Corleone in Godfather 2 sees the Statue of Liberty and all those. That's cool. And the scene in Glory when they're marching out to Fort Wagner and they're marching and you've got the soldiers on both sides.
Give me hell, 54.
That's the best part. Every time I'm saying,
I know.
Yes! And the music, and they're all cheering, and Denzel's got that smirk on his face, like, all right, here we go. And that's great. Always, every time, will give me chills.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. That scene really does hype you up, and you get ready, and you feel the build, especially with the night before scene, and you see them sharing and having those heart-to-heart talks in camp, and then going out, getting dressed for battle. Like, it really does really harp on the fact, like, these guys are about to do something crazy, extraordinary. And,
exactly.
And wow, that's a good point. So good wrap. I was glad because I forgot. I was like, we can't forget about Glory.
Nope. That's a good way to wrap it up, I guess.
Please. So, well, thanks again, Ryan, and thanks to our patient audience member over there. She did not fall asleep, so she was awake.
iPad the whole time.
But no, and maybe I have to have you back before another year goes by.
Sure.
We'll do another topic sometime, maybe.
Chickamauga all the way.
Yeah, there you go. Well, no, you know what? It'd be fun to have a little after action episode about your event.
Sure.
When you lead the group.
I'm gonna try.
Yeah.
I'm gonna try and get the kids to give me an authentic rebel yell on the battlefield.
Ooh,
doing
maybe
like Winfrey Field, like Claiborne's division, or charging up Snodgrass, or something like that.
Probably do it at Snodgrass when the or I forget where was the part of the line where Wood moved. And the whole
Brotherton Farm and just south. Yeah,
that would. One of those places would be the most fitting. Probably.
Yeah, we'll do that. Yeah, we can't cross the Lafayette Road like they did because of traffic.
It's crazy.
But we'll get on the other side of Lafayette Road and we'll go over the open fields. Like, let's do it. So.
And please do me a favor and give a shout out or spend a moment at the Hans Haig marker.
Yep.
He's one of my favorite people that was involved in Chickamauga battle, and I could do a whole episode on him sometime. But look up the story of Hans Haig in 15th Wisconsin.
Very cool. Very cool. Killed on the 19th, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
And but a very unique guy, very unique stories. So, but anyway, there's always so much to talk about.
Yep.
But hey, thanks again, Ryan. Really enjoyed this, and I hope you all enjoy, and I hope you guys go and start watching some of these movies we talked about. But until next time, thank you for listening, and stay tuned for more episodes and updates to come. And until then, have a good one, everybody.